Hey everybody, welcome to Jacob's Quest, and last night I got to go see the new M. Night Shyamalan produced and Ishana Night Shyamalan written and directed, but also based on a book from a third person, The Watchers, the movie The Watchers. And I gotta say, I had never heard of this book before seeing the trailer for this movie, and I had to go look it up, and at the time at least, there was very little information on the book, and I heard some people even started a conspiracy that the book was only written because M. Night Shyamalan wanted to make this movie, and so they're like, well, let's make a book, and then let's make up a fake author name, like a ghostwriter name or whatever, and then we'll base a movie on that book that we wrote or something. There was some conspiracy out there about that. I don't know how true any of that is, but in any case, The Watchers. And going into this movie, it was an interesting premise, and I was like, man, I just hope they stick the landing, which is pretty much the case for every single thing that M. Night Shyamalan touches, whether he's the producer or the writer or the director or really anything. If he's involved at all, it's always like, that's a really interesting premise. It would be great if it if it stuck the landing. And so I'm going to say this right off the bat. This, when you compare it to some of the lows of M. Night Shyamalan related projects, this is not as bad as a lot of those. Okay, in fact, I would say for the large majority of the movie, the first 2/3 of the movie especially, it was actually pretty decent. Like for a horror movie, for a mystery thriller, for a what the hell's going on, and you got your mind racking as what could be happening. It was doing really, really great, actually. I could oh, this could be a cool maybe a Universal Horror Nights kind of thing, they could make a haunted house about this. And then it's really only the third act when you start getting all these answers, and I'm conflicted on this, because on one hand, I'm definitely someone who, when you don't see a monster or you're not explained things, I want the answers. I want to see what the monster looks like. I want to know what's happening, and the movie does give you that. The conflicting thing, of course, is that you suddenly get this burst of exposition and answers, and it's all just kind of thrown at you, and it's so much lore, and you kind of have to think about the movie that you just saw up to this point and be like, okay, does this track? Does this all make sense? All these answers we're getting, and so you're kind of just stuck in that situation. And I will say, this movie kind of just ends in a strange way. We'll get into spoilers in a second, but yeah, just know, going into this movie, the first 2/3 are actually pretty solid for a horror movie. It's got a fascinating what is happening, what are these things, why do we have to do this, what are these rules in place, who can we trust, and I do think that you could probably guess at least some of the major beats that are about to happen before they happen, but it is such a weird thing that you never get the specifics of it. You'll never specifically grind down a bit okay, this is exactly what these things are and what is happening, until the movie tells you. Okay, so that's the movie in a nutshell. Just it was pretty good up to a point, and then I think there is a fall off part where most people are going to be and then it just kind of ends the way that an M. Night Shyamalan movie would end. Yeah, that's kind of what it is. I would say, if you don't have anything else going on and you want to just see an interesting thriller, it is probably worth watching, or unless you want to, movie theater prices these days, I don't know. But, if you just wanted to see something interesting, it's not that bad. You know what I mean? I know it's got the Shyamalan name attached to it. That puts a lot of people off instantly, but it's not that bad. Okay, so let's get into spoilers. I do want to talk about the third act and all the exposition dump that we get and all the answers that we get. Okay, so here we go. So spoiler time. Basically what it is that this forest is haunted by essentially fairies. That's, they're oh, they were called by many things. They're fairies. That's what they are. And so the idea is that these fairies, they used to live among humans, and they used to be our essentially angel guardians. They had wings, and they were these angelic mystical people, And then one day, humans went to war with the fairies, and they trapped them in this forest. And so the fairies had to live underground, and they lost their wings, and they became like these little cave creatures that only come out at night. And this scientist guy had been studying this whole time, and so he built this shelter, right? Which the logistics of building the shelter, because they come out at night, so you're like, okay, so you only have about 10 hours of daylight. You can build something, and then you all have to leave the forest entirely, and then come back the next day, maybe, or I don't know, you know what I mean? Like this is gonna take forever to build, because you can only build it during the daytime, because the creatures and monsters are gonna get you at night, right? So, anyways, doesn't matter. This scientist guy built this shelter in the middle of the forest, and basically he has an underground bunker part, and then he has a top layer part where it's a two-way mirror where the fairies can see you, and you just have to essentially put on a reality TV show for them. And that's really what the movie's kind of an allegory for, I guess, because they even like have the characters watching reality TV show DVDs in the movie. And so it's like, oh, okay, the one-way mirror and them being able to watch you, and you just kind of have to act natural like a human so they can study you. It's kind of like you're in a reality TV show, and like this whole thing is like a big television set, like it's a big glass barrier between you and them, and they're watching you. And that's kind of, I guess, the metaphor that they're going for here. It's like, oh, what if the watchers, the audience, are monsters? Get it? We're watching them. So there's something there. I don't know. But that's basically what it is. And he did all this just to study them, but also because he's like, oh, what if we can, they can shapeshift. They can study humans, and they can slowly learn how to turn into the people that they observe. And we kind of see them like transform into these like monster versions of people. And this is really where you kind of start guessing, like, okay, so someone in the bunker with them is going to turn out to be a monster. Like, that's, you know what I mean? Like, once they introduce that aspect of, oh, they can kind of shapeshift into looking like people, that's when you're like, okay, so now who is it? Which of course does end up being the big reveal. And yeah, basically they just have to live out there for however many weeks, and eventually they find a way to escape. And once they get back to the mainland, and you notice that the movie is still going, you're like, oh, okay, so it's not over. There's going to be some kind of big reveal now that they've escaped from the forest. And she goes to the dead professor's office, and she gets all the exposition where she learns about the fairies and the war and this and that. And then they introduce you to the halflings, this half-breed where humans and fairies had children together, and these children can go out during the daylight, and they can actually leave the enchanted forest, and like some of them might still be out there. And you're like, okay, so this is like last minute stuff you're introducing us to, and I suppose that's what's going to be revealed. And of course it turns out that the old lady that was with them the entire time is a shapeshifted fairy creature who's also a half-breed. And so she goes and attacks the two other survivors that managed to escape. And our main character has to explain to the fairy, like, hey, look, you're a half-breed, and that's why you were able to leave the forest, and that's why you can walk during the daytime. And then she grows her wings, which was like a thing that like the fairies are like, we used to have wings, we used to be special, and so she grows her wings for some reason. I don't know if it's because she decided to like let them live, and she decided to kind of be a good guy, because from this point on the fairy escapes, and they kind of leave it at like, oh, there might be more of you out there, you can go find them and help them. More halflings, right? And then the fairy grows her wings and she escapes, and then our main character just goes on and lives her life. And then she's like, I still see her out there every once in a while. Sometimes she's a stranger, sometimes she's like a little kid, and she's the fairy is just transforming into different people and watching her occasionally. And I don't know if it's like a I'm protecting you, or I'm just keeping an eye on you for some reason. They don't make that very clear, but the fairy just kind of decides to let them live, and that's really the end of the movie. And it was just such a last minute, like, oh, the halflings, and this one was gonna kill them both, and it kind of became like a horror movie, like they're running away from a singular monster for a minute, and then she just kind of decides to not kill them. Like she just gets talked out of it. So it's like, oh, all right. So I don't think we needed all that. You know what I mean? Like all of this, it felt like a very, very quick setup for a potential sequel where maybe, I don't know if we'll follow like this halfling and she'll go out and find more fairies and try to help them or something. I don't know. I don't know what the idea here was. They could have just left it as a reveal that the old lady the whole time was a monster, and then, you know, just had it like they go try to confront her, and then you don't know if the characters live or die or something. And like they could have just left it like that. It would have been simpler. It would have been cleaner. But instead, they introduced this whole halfling idea and the whole thing where like she grows her wings, but that was like a big deal that they lost their wings, but she just grew them, and we don't know why she just grew them. I don't know. And it was kind of just weird, you know, like it just ended on a very strange note where you're like, I don't know if this fairy is a good guy now because she let them live, or if why is she following her then? Like, what's the point of that? It was just kind of weird. And I was like, up until this point, you had such a solid, like, you know, you didn't have all your answers, you didn't know why this was happening, but it was like, you know, pretty thrilling of like, oh, we're running out of daytime, we got to get back to the thing, and we got to act normal, and then they start arguing with each other, and you can feel the tension building, and you're like, what's gonna happen next, you know? And then you get to afterwards, and it's just, I don't know, it just kind of went off the rails in its reveal. They could have made that a much cleaner, simpler reveal. But in any case, yeah, that's The Watchers. It kind of ended the way you would expect an M. Night Shyamalan, even though, again, this is based on a book. He did not come up with this concept. I'm pretty sure this, or at least something very similar to this, happened in the book. I'll have to go, I think I looked it up on Wikipedia once. But yeah, I think they were trying to set up for a sequel, and it was just really clunky and awkward way of doing that. It felt really rushed at the end. You know, they were trying to give you all these answers, but then they introduced like a whole different aspect of the halflings and this and that, and I was like, okay, you could have cut some of that out of here and made this much cleaner. But in any case, yeah, that's The Watchers. It's not the worst M. Night Shyamalan produced project in the world. In fact, I would say it was mostly fine. But yeah, I don't know. Go ahead and check it out for yourself. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.